So they were in North Dakota, and I asked them if this was a North Dakota refugee camp. So that's what I was looking at.
Yeah. By the way, I worked for a month. I had a job where got to work on the road in Grand Forks, and it's if you can stand the winters, Grand Forks is actually kind of a cool town.
Oh, you bet. You bet.
I mean, great people, salt of the earth.
You got it. Anyway, yes.
So, Dean, how do you explain leaving Minnesota?
Huh?
How do you explain leaving Minnesota? All the smart people come here.
Explain to me, my friend Eric Renquist, and explained to me the Vietnam War. And he said, "Hey, Dean, what are you doing after high school? Are you really going to go to U of M Duluth because your grades were so stinky you couldn't get into U of M?" And we had ridden up there on my Honda, and I said, "Burr," and he said, "I've been talking to a Marine Corps recruiter." We were 17, still in high school. And I said, "Marine Corps? What's that?" Nobody joins the Marine Corps. Everybody in Minnesota joins the Navy because they've never seen an ocean, And anyway, the rest is history. We joined on the buddy plan, and then Vietnam came up. This was March of '65. And the rest is history. But remember, my bio, what I'm starting to type is, I was a war baby out of, Vallejo, California, essentially, war workers, my mom from Minnesota. And then when I was 2, I made the decision to move back to Minnesota. I don't remember why, but my mom might have had influence on that. But it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I feel sorry for anyone who didn't grow up in Minnesota or.
Yeah.
Being from Iowa, I agree with that. I wish I hadn't been raised in Minnesota myself.
Yep.
I grew up in New Jersey. I went to college in Northfield and stayed.
Wow.
What can I say? I actually managed to find a job with a degree in physics.
Wow.
Where did you go to school in David, where did you go to school in Northfield? Was it Carleton?
Yeah.
Okay.
Carleton College, yep.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up in South Dakota and ended up in Michigan at Michigan State, and then eventually in the Twin Cities, where my mother was from. Dad was from a little town up north. And our high school reunion, the question is always, are a majority of the people attending going to be from the Twin Cities?
Well, it's nice to have a job.
Yeah.
Really helps for paying your bills. I would like to make an announcement again, or a first time for most of you. We're planning to try having a hybrid meeting on the 24th of May at Oxborough Library in Bloomington. You can attend either by Zoom, or you can attend in person. This is unusual for us. Dean, you don't have to come.
Well, will it be a plug-in hybrid? Because after this meeting, I'm going to go drive a plug-in hybrid.
Yes, we're going to plug in, if we need to run our computers at the library.
Plugs.
The 24th, you said?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's posted on the meetup.
Okay.
Not today.
Bob Kaufman, not today, correct. Bob Kaufman is going to be presenting for us, and he hasn't picked his topic yet, as far as I know, but he said he would try and put it up this week. But the 24th of May, we're hoping to actually get together for the first time since COVID.
And normal time, right?
Don, I've decided that you could be Tim Waltz's brother.
Really?
Yeah, you look like you look very similar to Tim Waltz, in my opinion.
Or a member of his family.
Oh,
Member of his family, yeah.
There could be a controversial background story on that one, maybe somehow.
Yeah, possibly.
By the way, David, I wanted to go to Carleton College, but I couldn't afford it. But the reason I wanted to go was because in the junior year they had a physics program where you could go to Princeton, I think it was.
I think by the time I got there, it was a 3-2 program with MIT. And I thought that was a great idea, but by then it was looking like maybe Vietnam was cranking up for me. And if I had gone to MIT, I probably would not have finished my degree. Because my draft number was for sure going to Vietnam.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Well, I had a low enough lottery number, so I ended up signing up because then I could pick what I wanted to do.
I ended up teaching for 3 years.
The ASA guy said they would guarantee me Russian language if I signed up with them. And that meant not going to Vietnam.
Right.
I was before the lottery, and the Marine Corps was the only people who would take me as a pilot because of my height.
Huh.
Okay.
But then I grew 2 inches in boot camp. And
they wouldn't take you even there?
And that was the end of my career as a military pilot.
I wanted to be an Air Force pilot, and I tried to enlist, and I took their military physical twice. And the second time, I was 5 minutes late to the military medical the first time, and the second time they flew me up to North Dakota for my physical on a little puddle jumper, and I got airsick, which reminded me that I had a history of motion sickness when I was a kid. And so I passed the physical, but they wouldn't take me because of the history of motion sickness. So the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I should probably get started here.
By the way, real quick, I was in the Marine Corps with a lot of pilot washouts, Navy and Marine Corps and whatever. And there's no shame in that, it ain't for everybody.
Okay, let's see. All right. Let's see. That was supposed to get me to the full screen here. Let me try that again. Slideshow from beginning. Yeah. Okay,
there you go.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. I'm calling this Energy Futures Part 1 because once I started really getting into this is a really big topic.
Yep.
And I'm not going to be able to cover a lot of it today. I'm going to cover a couple different kinds of power generating things, like a couple, actually not any renewable energy sources, but a couple of the others. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the energy in general, but concentrate mostly on coal and nuclear. So here's kind of a list of the different energy sources that we currently are using. Renewables are solar. Now solar is really 2 types. There's thermal solar, and there's the kind that converts directly to an electric current. The thermal solar is with the mirrors that shine on a tower that has a turbine on it. And wind energy, of course. Hydropower can be both hydropower from rivers, from flowing water, or from waves, which can be on a seacoast or on a large lake, shore of a large lake. Geothermal, we were talking about that just a week or 2 ago. Biomass is organic matter and stuff like that. Hydrogen is kind of a hybrid one because you have to create the free hydrogen in order to combine it back with oxygen. So it takes some energy to get the free hydrogen in the first place. Then the non-renewable resources, coal, oil, gas, and nuclear is classified as non-renewable too, because there's a limited amount of uranium.
Tom,
Yes.
when and how do you want questions handled?
I guess just about any time. I will be showing a couple short videos, three actually altogether, I think. So at some point I'll want to take a break and then we can take questions after those videos. But once I get through summarizing what's on the various slides here, after each slide would probably be okay.
Okay, the reason I asked partly is, do you want someone to watch hands for you?
Yeah, I can't, since I'm on full screen here. I can see you have your hand up, but that's all.
Yeah, the reason I raised my hand was because I don't see you mentioning fuel cells for hydrogen. And fuel cells work for both hydrogen and natural gas reasonably well to convert the energy in the chemical energy to electrical generation, actually more efficiently typically than a motor generator set would do.
Yeah, if you're turning a turbine, that can be kind of inefficient and subject to wear and tear also.
Yeah, and I mentioned that in the last, when I was rethinking methane, a couple, 2 weeks ago, I think. The one that I didn't get any videos of, so it's never going to show up on our video collection.
Okay, well, I'm only going to get, as I said, into today coal and nuclear pretty much. But I'll have a few other general things to say about energy too. So here's an interesting chart. This is a chart of the LCOE, which is the levelized cost of electricity, which is a measure of the average net cost of electricity generation for a generator over its lifetime. The generators being nuclear, gas, coal, geothermal, and so forth.
Yeah.
A more general term is the levelized cost of energy, which it also includes heat, but this is just the levelized cost for electricity. And levelized may basically mean it's the sum of the costs over the lifetime of this source's power generation, and divided by the sum of the electrical energy produced over that lifetime. So this particular graph is basically a supply side related graph for people who want to invest in these different technologies. But it shows the cost of investment in a way. So as you see the black line here, coal is pretty expensive. This green line, which is going up in cost pretty much compared to everything else, is nuclear. And so you can see why people aren't putting more money into coal and nuclear nowadays. It doesn't pay off. Down here where you have the renewables, it looks much better. It's not so expensive over the lifetime of whatever power generator you're using. So this is an investment in power generators, whether it's turbines or whatever, or nuclear generators. So does that make sense?
What happened to thermal solar?
Thermal solar is such a small part. I'll show you a number on that later. It's less than 1/2 of 1% of the energy that's generated.
Right.
Here is the formula. So the average unsubsidized levelized cost of electricity in the United States. For many of the sources, it's declined, especially for this yellow one, which happens to be solar panels. There's the formula. I don't know if I need to go through it, but here's what they mean. This I sub t is investment expenditures over the time interval t, which is the lifetime of that. From t to n, summarizing from summing from t to n. From t to n, t being a certain period of time. And M is the maintenance expenditures over that time. F is the fuel expenditures. So it tries to take all the different costs that will have to be put in to produce power using this particular source.
Does that equation explain why nuclear is going up?
Partly, part of the reason nuclear is going up is regulations. Another reason people aren't investing in it is because a lot of people don't want it. There are a lot of people who advocate against nuclear, partially because of the waste storage problems. But
Also
the fact
because of
that is
insurance.
going up compared to most of the others is interesting. I think part of it was building a nuclear power plant takes a lot of time and a lot of materials. And for example, in the last 4 years during COVID, supply chains were very bad. So those costs went up because of that. And I don't know why there's a big jump in 2016.
Security is also a significant cost for a nuclear power plant. We would like not to have the nuclear waste end up in the hands of terrorists.
Yeah.
You have a couple other hands up still, or again?
Yeah, can you, I see Dean.
Yeah, I've been up for a while. Yeah, fear factor is why nuclear, and remember that our grid is also potentially in the hands of terrorists. And so is a whole lot of other technology, but that's another subject.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on. The phases of power production are kind of something I came up with. It's when people calculate the risks and costs of power production, they don't look at byproducts, for example. Okay, number one, production infrastructure is what it takes to get this particular resource that you need to produce the power. So production infrastructure for coal will be all the graders and tractors and diggers and whatever you need to access the coal. And then you have the storage of it. Production, well, these different sources work different ways, but when you produce the coal out of the ground, I'll get into this later with coal, but there are a lot of byproducts, especially if you do the MTS, the mountaintop removal, MTR. So I'll talk about that later. Storage in the case of many of the renewables like wind and solar, you have to store the power somewhere. And also even with nuclear, because demand goes up and down during the day, and nuclear power plant always puts out the same amount of power. Sometimes you'll have to use extra, sometimes you'll have to store because you have extra. So what's happening in the case of nuclear, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but battery storage is not just for solar. They're also talking about using that with nuclear power in conjunction with that, to store excess and to use it when the demand is high. So there are a number of parts of the production of power from any particular source that should be accounted for. Refining, for example, refining oil and the byproducts from that, or coal, when you process the coal. And distribution not only of the resource, such as coal, getting it, by train from the mine to the power generator, but also distribution of the power once you produce it. So that's the grid we were talking about a little earlier. And then when people use this, for example, if you're using oil in a vehicle or to produce power or whatever, you're burning something and you're creating pollution. So you have to worry about those byproducts too. So this is a number of things that need to be considered, I think, when you're talking about using any particular resource to produce power. Not all of these are always considered.
Tom,
Yeah,
could you go back to that last slide for just a second?
yeah.
You mentioned batteries for storage, but
Yes.
there is also talk of converting excess electricity to fuel gas, either in the form of hydrogen or natural gas, as a way of levelizing the load to a large power plant. And that'll come up again.
Yeah, I don't know how the efficiency compares with batteries, but it's probably not too bad.
It's not nearly as good, but potentially it can be very much cheaper. And if you're converting to natural gas, we have the pipeline already in place that can serve as a storage container for natural gas. Hydrogen's harder to store.
Well, hydrogen, that's being developed. I mean,
Yeah.
Honda, for
question-
example, is creating canisters of hydrogen you can stick in your car and get twice as much mileage as you do with a tank full of gas.
Yep.
Say, I had my hand up as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, there you are, Warren. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Two things. One on that calculation you showed us. Were there any inputs as to the cost of carbon, like a carbon tax or something like that?
No.
Okay.
As I said, this is kind of a supply side equation for
all
people
right.
who are interested in investing.
Okay.
So this is whether people want to build a plant using a particular kind of resource.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And then on the using extra electricity, there was an effort at the University of Minnesota to produce ammonia as a method using wind and as a storage mechanism as well. So ammonia. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's another one. Thank you.
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can store energy. you know, create things that can burn like hydrogen or whatever, but they all have different efficiencies. So you want to try to find something that's efficient. Okay. The different kinds of power plants, we're still talking mostly electricity, although a lot of these processes, such as burning coal or gas or nuclear, create heat too, which can be used. There actually are some power plants that are only for heat, some only for electricity, and some are a hybrid. You can pipe the excess heat from this plant to heat other buildings, as well as produce electricity in some cases. But let's get back to electricity. Most of our electric power is transmitted in alternating current, AC, okay? But almost all electronics use direct current. Most lighting uses alternating current. Large appliances can use alternating currents, but some use both, because to control all the electronics in them, they need direct current. So cars use direct current. Power tools, some are AC, some are DC with batteries. So the point is, solar, some of these power generators tend to produce one or the other. Anything that runs a turbine will produce alternating current. But solar power produces direct current. That is, solar cells produce direct current. So do hydrogen fuel cells. And electrolysis to produce the hydrogen also uses direct current. So someplace along the way, rectifiers and inverters need to be used to convert from one to the other and adjust the power level. So most of the turbines that produce alternating current are powered by steam, which is created by a fossil fuel or nuclear plant, or water or wind also can turn turbines. And that produces alternating current. It's a matter of efficiency. Most of these naturally are good at turning turbines mechanically, either through you know, expanding gas, water, or steam, or just the power of the wind and water, something like that. But because turbines have moving parts, they usually require a lot more maintenance than the methods that produce direct current. So, and the ones that produce heat to boil water to turn the turbine require even more maintenance. And that's a lot of them. So some methods are inherently more efficient than others. I guess you want to. Okay. Does that make sense to people? Let's see.
I know that I've been talking to Doug Shoemaker about the iron air batteries that Minneapolis or Minnesota uses. I think their efficiency is around 60%.
Yeah, that's not something you can carry around in your car easily, though. They're usually pretty big, if I recall.
Well, they're great for grid storage, and they give you 4 days of storage.
Yeah.
But the 60% is probably the most downside to that particular resource for storage.
Yeah. Okay, here's a chart of the electricity generation by energy source in the U.S. The total production, I think this was, yeah, just as of 2023, 4,176 billion kilowatt hours was the total production in the US that year. And fossil fuels accounted for 60% of it. Okay. Of that 60%, natural gas is 43.1, coal was 16.2, and oil was less than 0.5%. Oil is not used to produce electrical power very much. It's more for transportation and heating. At some point, that's something we can talk about, but right now we're just talking about electrical power generation. Some people might be surprised that we're kind of a leader in nuclear. 18.6% of our power was generated by nuclear power plants. 775 billion kilowatt hours in 2023 from nuclear. Renewables, not counting nuclear, 894. That's just over 21% of the power that was generated in 2023. And wind accounted for about half of that, more than solar. Now, solar, this solar is large-scale solar. It's not rooftop house solar. Let's see. Yeah, I have that number, how much, I think it's on the order of 17 billion kilowatt hours from the small scale solar. That's not on this chart though. We get a fair amount from renewables, but we get more from natural gas, and that's twice the renewables altogether by itself. So we have a long way to go. Coal is an interesting case. This was in 2023. It provided 16.2% of our energy, our electrical power that year. The year before it was like 19%. And it's been dropping for decades, actually. Let's see, where do I have those numbers? I might have them later on. Any questions on that? This at the bottom here is the EIA, is the U.S. Energy Information Administration, and that's where I got these numbers.
What's included under other? Would that be like waves or?
I'd have to go back to the real chart and look at it. Hydropower, I'm not sure if that's waves and moving water, like rivers, or not.
There's also tides and hamster wheels, so.
Yeah, there's lots of possibilities.
That's hamster, yeah.
I suspect hamster wheels is not even a fraction of
0.2% ain't a very big factor.
no, but it's still, since we use so much, it's a lot of hamsters. It's probably worth mentioning that the nuclear power plants typically are aging out now. They're approaching their 40-year limit.
No, most of them are past that. They're on their first 20-year extension.
Yes.
We'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Okay, and maybe you're going to get to this, but the trajectory on price is up for nuclear. The concern with coal was that the trajectory on price was up because in the past, we've not considered pollution to be a concern. And now the laws are requiring that they put scrubbers on the coal plants. And so when the commercial power production could get away with just letting it go to the atmosphere, the cost was lower.
Yeah, I don't know how much those scrubbers cost, but they're not cheap.
Right. And not only are they an additional cost, but they use something like 18% of the fuel to run the scrubber to take the pollution out of the exhaust. So it's not only an initial investment, it is a continuing hit to your efficiency for production of electricity for sale from the power plant.
Yeah, it makes it a lot less efficient. Having to use
Yep.
a lot of that energy to clean it up. Okay. Let's get into coal. I list 5 types, starting with peat, working down from the surface of the earth down lower, basically. I think you all know what peat is. It's basically decayed plant matter. So it's somewhat concentrated in carbon. But it doesn't go to a great depth. Perhaps 10 meters is about the deepest you can get. And that might take 10,000 years to accumulate that much. So since it accumulates at a rate of about 1 millimeter a year, depending on climate and so forth. Peat is still actually used in a lot of places, mostly for heating. But I think there are some places it's used to generate power too. It's used a lot in Finland, Sweden, Ireland. It's often used for domestic heating and also for some power generation, but that has declined due to environmental concerns and the rise of other fuels. It's the energy, of course, comes from photosynthesis. It's basically converted sunlight. So it's not a global source like oil or coal, but it is a significant local regional energy source. So the peat, as it gets buried, becomes lignite. Deeper down, you'll find subbituminous coal, then bituminous coal, and then anthracite. Anthracite is the most concentrated in carbon. Anthracite is like 85% carbon. Bituminous is, get the numbers, 50 to 65%. Here are the numbers. I'll get to that in just a minute. I think it's on the next page, actually. Okay, where does this come from? Oh, you know, West Virginia has a lot of coal. That's almost all bituminous coal. It's very common in the state. Some regions have lower sulfur than others. The sulfur is the real dirty stuff. When you burn that, you get sulfuric acid and all sorts of stuff. But you might be surprised to know that Wyoming is the biggest coal producing state in the US. And that's mostly subbituminous coal. Pennsylvania is pretty big too, and that's where the anthracite is. So Pennsylvania had a coal production of 4.2 million short tons back in 2023. West Virginia had 84.6, so about twice as much. but it was a little lower quality coal. The problem with anthracite coal is it needs a high temperature to burn it. So once you can get it burning, it's pretty good. It's clean, but it's not easy to do it. South Dakota has coal too, but it's lignite. It's lowest grade stuff. Anthracite is 86 to 97% carbon. And it has the highest heating value. It burns the cleanest, but it is hard to ignite. It's used primarily for heating and industrial processes, not so much for generating electrical power. Bituminous is 45 to 86% carbon, and it's the most abundant type of coal in the U.S. And that's used widely for electrical generation and steel production. Subbituminous coal, which comes from the western states mostly, is 35 to 45% carbon, has a lower heating value than bituminous and anthracite, but that's primarily also used in electricity generation. So getting the coal, there's several different ways, depending on where the coal is. There's surface mining, which can be open pit, like the way we get our iron ore in Minnesota, or mountaintop removal, MTR. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And there's also underground mining. In West Virginia, they've pretty much exhausted the veins you can get at with underground mining. There's the room and pillar, the continuous mining, and longwall mining. And let's see, I had descriptions of those, but I don't see them right now. It's not that important. But they use different kinds of equipment for different kinds of veins of coal. All right. Any questions? I see a couple hands. Go ahead, David.
Sorry, I just forgot to take it down.
Okay. Carol.
Yeah, could you help me with translating these terms into the more popular terms? I'm thinking particularly right around World War I, Britain banned the use of what they call soft coal because they basically had a stationary inversion and a lot of people died. And
I'm not sure what they were burning. It could have been lignite.
yeah, so what is it that's banned in England that they refer to as soft coal?
Well, lignite has been called soft coal, so that might be what they were talking about.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, I was just,
I'm not positive, but that's my guess.
okay.
And that's the stuff they mine mostly in South Dakota. And they do use it for power generation. Although the bituminous and subbituminous are better for that. Dean.
Yeah, so yeah, my dad worked in petroleum, and the anthracite is the equivalent of what the market calls sweet light crude, as in it's oil that you get the most energy out of.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that depends in the case of coal on the percentage of carbon content.
Right.
H. Tom. Did you have a question? Okay.
I don't think he heard you.
I don't know if he did either. His hand is up.
You're muted, Tom. H. Tom, you're muted.
I had a question and I've forgotten it. so I will take my hand down.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. There are several stages in getting coal from the ground to the power plant and producing power. First is extraction, then the transportation, the processing, the combustion, and the waste disposal. And these all have costs, many of which are environmental and health related. I thought I had some notes on each of these points, but I don't see them. Oh, there we go. So, the environmental impacts of these different stages, probably the most significant comes from the extraction, especially surface mining, which I mentioned in a couple slides before. And that can lead to significant habitat loss and water contamination. So let's talk about each of these stages a little bit. For extraction, coal can be extracted surface or underground. Surface mining is like strip mining, which can cause extensive habitat loss, soil erosion, water contamination. Underground mining, while potentially less disruptive, can lead to cave-ins, gas explosions, acid mine drainage. Water gets in the mine and leaches acid out, or sulfuric acid, whatever. Some other possible problems are methane emissions, which are associated with coal mining, especially in underground mines. And acid mine drainage, where the acidic water leaches from exposed coal and sulfur-bearing minerals, can contaminate the water. And that actually is very prevalent, happens a lot in mountaintop removal. Transportation, coal can be transported by rail or truck or barge, and each of those has its own environmental impacts. You're burning oil pretty much in any of those to move the coal from one place to another. So that adds more pollution. As well as especially if you're transporting by truck, there's dust and noise pollution. In some cases, coal dust can be a significant source of air pollution, according to a study on open cast coal mine production. So coal dust can be a problem. When you're processing the coal, which includes crushing it, washing it to remove impurities, and other operations, that can generate waste streams and emissions. And waste materials such as coal gang and fly ash from the combustion also require disposal. When you burn it, you can create electricity and or heat. And sometimes you don't want the heat. When you burn it, that can release greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and CH4, and sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, ash. So there's lots of problems with burning this. That's why the higher carbon ones are cleaner. They burn at higher temperatures and they burn cleaner. You don't get as much ash and that kind of thing. Once you've burned it to boil the water, to turn the turbines, to create the power, you have to get rid of the waste. And that's another problem. You get solid and liquid waste, such as the fly ash and wastewater. And that can lead to land contamination or water pollution or soil erosion. So this is a very problematic type of source of energy. The producers of the energy have to pay for at least some of that, but they don't pay for the environmental impacts, the long-term impacts that come from all the waste products. Okay, so I mentioned some of these environmental impacts, greenhouse gas emissions. Carbon dioxide is a major output from burning coal. Air pollution, you get pollutants like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, which all are bad for humans as well as animals and plants. You get water pollution because of the sulfur, especially. You can get sulfuric acid mine drainage and wastewater that can contaminate the water and also leach other natural minerals from the surrounding soil and contaminate the water with other minerals you don't want in it. Land degradation, especially surface mining, can degrade the land and the ecosystem. What they do with mountaintop removal, you're probably familiar with it. They blow up mountaintops. They flatten. They've flattened about 3,200 mountaintops in West Virginia. Many tens of thousands of acres. And where do the tops of the mountains go? Well, some of it is coal that gets scooped up, but the rest tends to go down the side of the mountain into the valleys between the mountains, polluting the streams down there. So that's an easy way to get coal. It's a lot easier than underground mine, but it's a lot more destructive method. Okay, resource depletion. Well, it depletes fossil fuel resources. So yeah, there's a limited supply. And human health. When you're polluting the water, especially as well as the air, that exposes not only the workers, but the people who live anywhere near there to hazardous substances. You get higher incidences of cancer and other kinds of diseases. The people in the industry will say, oh, they keep it really clean, but it's not true. Okay. Next page, not quite. In 2023, coal-fired power plants generated, as we saw back here, 16.2% of the power of the country's electricity. The previous year, as I said, was 19.7%. And in 2014, it was 38.6%. And in 2001, it was 51%. Over half of our power came from coal. So it's 1/3 of what it was just 25 years ago. So we are weaning ourselves off of coal, but we still use quite a bit of it. As you can see, we get 675 billion kilowatt hours from it in 2023. The U.S. is a big producer of coal. It's not the biggest user of coal. The biggest markets for coal are China and India. China has, I think, somewhere around 1,000 coal-based power plants. Yeah, that's a lot. India has several hundred. So I don't know what the actual number in the US is, but it's been going down. I see a couple hands up. Go ahead, Stan.
I saw a documentary about the production. Caterpillar produces a largest vehicle that of any company that is used for extraction for coal, but I'm sure, but they also talked about the shell oil that's up in Ontario or up in Canada. And these things run, they have two twin, I don't know what the cylinders on it, but they have their largest diesel engine. There's two of them in parallel running these units. They're several stories tall. The tires themselves are a single story tall. It's a absolutely huge dump truck slash vehicle, and and all they do is run them 24/7 on these open pits or these open mines. So I mean, that's an entire company producing an entire product that wouldn't be necessary if they weren't doing that style of mining.
Right. That's part of the what was it?
Extraction.
No, well, that's part of the upfront costs to yeah. It's part of the production infrastructure. And people don't think about those kinds of things as being part of the supply chain, you might say, to produce power from that particular resource. But yeah, we wouldn't have to build those if we didn't do it that way. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm surprised that biomass is not considered the lowest form of coal.
Well, biomass can most of it is wood. The biomass that we use now is mostly wood. And I guess you could think of that as coal, pre-peat or whatever. But
It's the beginnings of charcoal.
yeah.
I know. I read Arthur Ransom stories, watching the kids watching the charcoal makers in England.
Yeah, that's broken out separately from coal here, because it in a way it's a renewable resource.
Yeah.
It's not a fossil fuel. It doesn't have to sit in the earth for millions of years to become what it is.
I'm surprised that renewables is so high. You just, ugh.
Yeah, I was surprised that wind was over 10%.
I think Iowa gets 60% of their power from wind.
Yeah, there are places that are made for that. Southeast Minnesota too. Okay, no more hands.
Dean,
Do you have something, Dean?
That was up, but it went down. Yeah, real quick. I posted it, but yeah, all coal burning of the sale of any coal in England is forbidden as of 2023, except for anthracite. That's the only exception, and steam coal, whatever that is. And boys and their toys. Stan, I saw those trucks, Caterpillar trucks, down in Baja California at a salt mine, where they evaporate huge ponds. And I had a picture of my Volkswagen van only went about 2/3 of the way up the tire on this beast.
Yeah.
It was mind-boggling.
Yeah, they're huge. They're like a building.
Yep.
A big building.
They have a bathroom. They have a kitchen practically, Yeah. Hey.
Okay. Coal's future. Almost 92% of the coal that is mined is used in power plants to create electricity. So I have a video that considers phasing out coal and what it would take. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I'm gonna have to unshare this and go to my other thing.
Chris has his hand up.
Go ahead.
Percent of the coal is used to generate power. What's the other 8% used for?
Say that again.
92% of the coal is used to generate power. What is the other 8% used for?
Heating mostly.
Okay, same thing. It's not like a hydrocarbon resource for other products. That's the question.
Right. It's not. Oil is a better resource, or natural gas actually is a better resource for other products.
I remember when I was in Germany, I spent some time in the actual household of a German nationalist, German person, and I took a shower one evening, and they had a shower tank for the water, and there was a drawer at the bottom, and you just dropped a piece of charcoal or coal at the bottom of that, and actually lit it up and waited for it to warm up before you could take a shower.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna play this video here. It's only 3.5 minutes long, so.
Was this before or after Trump's reelection?
It was before, not long before, but
So they're not projecting a third term.
no. So that video is probably half a year old or so. But do I think that the G7 is going to reach the 2035 date? I do not. So I don't see much of hope of getting the G20 on board for 2040. So I think Trump seems to want to push the most polluting type of energy source, namely coal. So I think it's going to be around for a while.
I can't help but I can't forget the scene I saw from the video before the storm with Leonardo DiCaprio talking to one of the female heads of energy resources in India. And she said, if you think that we in India who have this coal and are seeking the lifestyle and the standard of living that you have are not going to follow the same path that you did in order to achieve that, you're out of your effing mind. So, I mean, I think that there's that side of the coin. And, you know, it's almost as if we're trying to tell them, well, just wait until we figure out renewables and we're just going to switch you out to that. And they have all this resource to go for. That's a hard argument to make for them.
Yeah, it'd be nice if all the technology were there and they could just skip that step entirely and go straight to renewables. But that's very difficult to do, especially at our state of technology and political systems and so forth, and the economic systems. There's a lot of inertia with the fossil fuel industry.
Both kinds of inertia.
Both kinds?
Inertia of motion and inertia of rest.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought you meant linear versus rotational, but whatever.
I'd go there.
Okay, I have another video that's also related to coal, and this has to do with mountaintop renewal, so I'd like to show that. Removal. Okay, off the top. So I lived in Charleston, West Virginia, in the Kanawha Valley, for almost a year while I was consulting down there. And it's a pretty place, but you have to be, fortunately, I lived fairly, fairly well up the hill out of town. So when Union Carbide and the other chemical factories released their toxic gases, we didn't get it. I remember there was one time when there was a gas release, and it destroyed the finishes on all the cars sitting in the car lots nearby. So, of course, that's not directly related to coal, but that's the kind of environment that they seem to be used to. Any questions? No? Okay. Go on then. Let me bring up.
I have a comment.
Yes. Go ahead.
The idea that you have a God-given right to destroy the earth for some kind of a profit
Right.
is an interesting twist on using scripture as a method of diminishing the argument against. I think I forget there's a word in theology, or not theology, but there's a word for religious people who believe that the earth is there for their taking, and if they don't do it, they're almost violating God's will. I forget the term for that. Maybe Don knows that, but the bottom line is that that's kind of a mentality that's tied in with that sense of religious abiding by religious doctrine to maintain the profitability. And Rockefeller was very well aware of that all along with his use of fossil fuels and tying it in with God's will. Dominionism. I think it's called dominionism.
Yeah, yeah, God put it there for us to use, so we're going to do it. It's not so different, really, from American exceptionalism.
Yeah, well, I think they're tied together, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, China also has their exceptionalism for many historical reasons.
Okay, let's move on to nuclear power. We have 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so. Okay, most of the nuclear reactors in the United States were built by 1974. And they're on their 20-year extension of their original 40-year license. You might be surprised that the U.S. has the most nuclear power of any other country currently. France gets 70% of their power from nuclear. We don't get nearly that percentage, but we're much bigger than France. So we have more reactors and we generate more nuclear power from nuclear sources than France does. China is quickly catching up. Even Russia is, I think, catching up since we haven't built, well, I can't say we haven't built any reactors in 50 years because we just did in the last couple of years. I'll get to that in a minute. The capacity factor of nuclear is good. That means the percentage of the time in which it's actually producing power. They don't take nuclear power plants down for maintenance nearly as often as they do coal and oil and those kinds of things. They're up and running 92.7% of the time on average. So it's the highest of any other kind of power plant. So if you want steady power, that's one way to get it. Here in Minnesota, we have 3 reactors. 1 at Monticello and 2 at Prairie Island. The ones at Prairie Island produce 522 and 519 megawatts of energy. Each one of them took 5.5 years to build. One finished 1 year after the other. Interestingly, at 522 and 519 megawatts, they're the 2 smallest reactors in the United States. The one at Prairie Island is, the one at Monticello is 628 megawatts. So it's a bigger build. It's a little bigger. It didn't take as long to build. It took 4 years. That could be because of a slightly different kind of reactor. Monticello is a BWR, a boiling water reactor, and at Prairie Island, they're PWR, pressurized water reactors, which is the most common kind in the U.S. So it's not just boiling steam that's used, it's pressurized to drive the turbines a little faster. We did have another one in Elk River for a while. It was only 22 megawatts, and it was in the mid-1960s. And they dismantled it in the early 1970s, so it ran for less than 10 years. It started out as coal and oil at that plant, and they converted it. So it was coal and oil from 1950 to 64, and then it converted for, I don't know, 5 years or so, and then it went back before 1970 to coal and oil. And then in 1989, they converted to burning solid waste, and they closed it in 2019. So it's had a varied history there in Elk River. The other closest one to us, there was one in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was 48 megawatts, only twice as big as the Elk River one. But that closed in 1987 after less than 18 years of operation and has been dismantled. So with basically 2 power plants comprised of 3 reactors, we're one of 28 states that have nuclear reactors. Nothing's been built since the mid-70s until just the last few years in Georgia. The Vogtle plant in Georgia now has 4 reactors. Unit 4 was just completed last year, and it was kind of a fiasco because it cost more than twice as much as the original plan and had huge time overruns too. It took nearly 15 years to build. So that's one reason that people are a little weary of jumping into building reactors. They usually cost more than you think, and they take a long time to build. That plus the fear factor has slowed down development of nuclear power. 3 Mile Island was March 1979, And that's about the time that we stopped building reactors here in the United States. And then Chernobyl was 1986, Fukushima 2011. So for the last 50 years, the impetus, the enthusiasm for new construction has been reduced, you might say. Yeah, do you have a question, Dean? Oh, you're muted.
Somebody's got background stuff playing with an open mic.
Yeah, that's not me. I could hear something though. I couldn't.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not really irritating, but it's a little irritating. Yeah, and of course, I pointed out before that all three of those, Chernobyl, 3 Mile, Fukushima, were all engineering / human errors, had nothing intrinsically to do with nuclear power. And what about the idea, and I've seen stuff on this, of getting a design, maybe not the best design, but everyone is a one-off, it seems like, right? So get a design, prove it, and then replicate it, kind of like we do with cars. We don't make them all by hand, right? So
Yeah, I don't know what would force a person to change the design, whether it's your access to water, or the lay of the land, or the kind of fuel you're getting, whether it's bituminous, subbituminous, or whatever. So there's a lot of variables that can go into operating a plant. David.
But particularly the need for water to cool the steam so that you can actually get the conversion from heat to motion for the generator has resulted in having to shut some of the nuclear power plants down because the water wasn't available to cool the one side of the heat engine, if you will. So there's a risk to putting a huge amount of money into a long-term build for a commercial power plant. That's one of the reasons why solar photovoltaics are so attractive, is that once you've built the photovoltaic panel, you can install it very quickly by comparison with a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
The other thing that's been the case for the last 20 years is that our usage of electricity has been basically flat. We have found, and the biggest bang for your buck, is finding more efficient ways to use electricity to produce the things we need, the heat, the cool, our housing, refrigeration. Now we're actually doing more efficient transportation with electricity. As we become more efficient in our use, we've been able to use basically a levelized amount of electricity in the United States for the last 15 years. So the concern at this point is that that may no longer be the case. But historically, we haven't been using a lot more electricity in the United States. We've been getting more done with a steady amount.
Right, with more electrification of vehicles and AI data centers. That's one of the big impetuses for nuclear power. These guys who want to run the AI data centers want a power plant right next to them.
Absolutely, but what they're not doing is looking to the future. And China has put us on notice that you can do AI with much less complicated computer chips than what they first started with.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, and I don't see how an AI that's based on an expensive computer is going to compete for price with an AI that's based on a much cheaper computer, more efficient energy use computer.
Right. Yeah, the transistors don't use as much energy, don't heat up as much, that type of thing. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
I
I agree with what you were saying.
Yeah, and listen, the AI and what I've heard is, the flat, more or less flat electricity demand because of efficiency, etc. AI has thrown that into a loop, and so has cryptocurrency mining. Very, very electricity intensive.
Yeah. Yeah, plus as we electrify our transportation fleet, that'll be a bigger burden too.
Absolutely.
So Carol,
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
yes.
I was going to mention that fairly recent research into material science has made a really big difference in the efficiency of doing things with electricity. Lighting, you look at the LED lighting as opposed to incandescent lighting uses much less electricity to achieve the same effects or better effects.
Yeah, as technology improves, hopefully we'll reduce our energy consumption or increase our efficiency at least.
Yeah, I mean, things like the Walmart empire suddenly deciding to cut all of their stores over to lighting with LED. That makes a really big difference. That's one of the reasons that our electricity demand has stabilized.
Yes. It's like if you're familiar at all with city planning and highway engineering or whatever planning, when you increase the carrying capacity of a freeway, for example, add another lane,
Yeah.
it gets jammed up again right away because more people start using it. If we increase the efficiency and make things easier to use, more people will be using it. So the energy consumption probably doesn't go down, but it can help it remain flat and still get more done. But as we're adding more things now that require, everything's going electronic. So, as was mentioned, crypto and AI and those types of things are big draws on the electrical power grid. So it's not only producing the power, but it's the grid itself, getting the power to where it needs to go. And that's another part of the infrastructure that costs money. David.
With regard to cryptocurrency, I would like to recommend a book called Easy Money. It seems to me like the future of cryptocurrency is that either the government will have to regulate it or run it. And if that's the case, there won't be currency mining to create a federal cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency has been, do we want to say corrupted? It's been a good way to lose money for most of the people that have been involved with it in the United States. I don't know that this book was written about its use in China, but I recommend a book called Easy Money as far as the future of cryptocurrency.
Author?
I'd have to look it up. I can get it for you.
Okay.
Dean.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, with regards to Carol's comment about LEDs, here's what I see with my eyes, and I'm observational, I'm empirical. It's my nature. People, because they're so efficient, and by the way, when you get an LED that's super bright in your kitchen so that you can see when you're pushing 80 years old, they're not like 10%, you know, they they're getting up there. And what I've seen is because LEDs are perceived as and are efficient, people put a more and more and more of them, and they burn them 24/7. I live up on a hill and I see my neighbors, and you
Yeah.
can get a string of lights that lights your whole yard, and they got security lights, and they burn 24/7, or at least dusk to dawn. You know, and I'm weird. It's the way I was raised. We got a little tiny little LED that uses 0.3 watts or a watt that lights our microwave oven. And I turned the darn thing off at night because I said, I don't need that 3 watts, you know, but that's just, in other words, when something becomes abundant, as in LED lighting, people tend to use more of it.
I agree.
And the price is so cheap for us in this country.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, a quick follow-up, I posted it, the current solar cells, right? So we manufacture solar cells in the US, but we don't manufacture the photovoltaics. They're all made in China currently, and there is a 3,500% tariffs on them. Now, what effect that has on a finished panel, I don't know. But so we'll see how that works out. But
Yep. Okay. Okay, here's just a little thing about how nuclear is used. Nuclear reactor produces a lot of heat, of course, but it's basically used to boil water, to create steam, to turn a turbine. Produce alternating current electricity. I already mentioned the capacity factor of 92.7%. These nuclear reactors are running that amount of time, 92%, almost 93% of the time on average, which is a lot better than oil, coal or gas plants. So it's a steady source of power. I think I mentioned that because there are lower and higher demands periodically for electricity, and this always produces a steady, even current. It's hard to unlike a gas plant, it's hard to ramp it up and down a nuclear reactor. So that's why people are talking about using battery storage in conjunction with nuclear power plants. So when demand is low, the excess power that's produced by the plant can be stored, and then when demand is high, the batteries can be drained to supplement what's coming out of the nuclear power plant. So batteries are important no matter what technology you're looking at now. It's not just for solar. Carol is next.
Yeah. Fusion is also nuclear. Is there anything really new on the fusion front?
There has been progress just in the last year. China, Japan, I think, and we're ramping up some research into that also. I think the longest sustained reaction I heard was it was several seconds. It might have been as many as 20 seconds.
Oh, I heard something in the minutes range
Well, maybe maybe
with tokamak technology.
yeah. Yeah. The problem, of course, is containing it. You know, you magnetically contain it somehow, and it's not easy. It seems, I don't know. Once you get it going, if it can be sustained, it's a good way to make heat, I guess.
Well-
Make a lot of heat, but it seems a little odd to me to create a 1,000,000-degree fire to boil water. So, you have to be able to use the heat some other way also, I think, to make it really worthwhile. I think was Dean next or David? I'm not sure.
Dean,
Oh, I'm next? Yeah, I'll try to be 5 seconds. Yeah, it seems like fusion. Whatever happened to cold fusion, by the way? But anyway, seems like
Time's
fusion.
up. That
Yeah.
was 5 seconds.
All right, wait. Is the holy grail of energy, you know, and it may be the holy grail for the next 100 years. Who knows?
Yeah, cold fusion, I think, is a myth, a chimera. I don't
No.
see it happening.
If you look into it, you'll find that the Navy has patented some of the issues around cold fusion.
But
So
we still
they don't
haven't
go
done
to
it.
that trouble if they don't think there's anything there. But we haven't proven that technology.
Right.
We have proven the technology for nuclear technology that would generate more fuel than you use, the breeder reactors. But they were so expensive, and the equipment to do it needs maintenance. The lifetime for the cooling equipment associated with just a breeder reactor puts the cost up where it's not competitive currently. France has done one pattern for a nuclear power plant and then repeated it all across the country. And they get 70% of their electricity from nuclear.
Right.
But it's not cheap, and it requires maintenance, and it's a centralized power plant that you don't really want in your backyard. I can't believe, as you say, 1,000-degree, 1,000,000-degree fire to boil water at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The cooling to maintain that kind of a temperature difference is going to make that relatively expensive. It's not proven technology, and so the risk of a 10-year project or a 5-year project, when you don't know that your demand for electricity is going up, they think it may. And if your business is based on it, you have to figure out how you're going to get that power. But the odds are that solar photovoltaic is still coming down in price and may be half the price it is now when they get that nuclear power plant built. That's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe, you've got to be desperate to build a nuclear power plant today under those terms.
There are some applications for licenses out there that haven't been approved yet.
Right.
But as you say, I wouldn't take that risk.
It's a bet. It's a risk.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole as a futurist, because we don't know what other factors are going to reduce the demand for electricity in that same time frame. I've talked a number of times about Brighter from Rethink X And one of the chapters and one of the videos that I showed you the beginning of in a previous presentation, why we aren't going to be investing in nuclear anytime in the near future.
Yeah. Let's see. Do you still have a hand up, Carol?
Yes, no, it is re-upped.
Okay.
Um,
I think you're next.
are you calling on me?
Yeah, you then Dean.
Okay, it is re-upped in response to David. You're making it sound silly when you talk about nuclear reactions to boil water. But if the water you're boiling is seawater, and you incorporate this into desalinization, God, is that the right word?
Yeah, that'll work.
It's like aluminum, you know, I mean, sorry, but
Aluminium.
Yeah, in Britain it's aluminium. But anyway.
I know. I keep stumbling over
Let's continue anyway.
yeah. I mean, you could do your desalinization by literally boiling seawater offshore and creating rain rather than just, you know, collecting drip, drip, drip fresh water. You know, I mean, think big.
Yeah.
Think
I think-
cheap.
I think Dean was next, then David.
I was actually next. Yeah, going back to the cooling. So St. Onofre, which had 3 reactors at one point, where Nixon lived, retired, and we had the Pacific Ocean as a heat sink. And guess what? It was caused environmental problems off the coast, and that was one of the reasons they shut down St. Onofre, because it was doing bad things to our ocean, and we don't like that, you know. And patents on cold fusion, patents are a dime a dozen. There's 8 million patent attorneys in Silicon Valley.
Okay, let's see. Did you have something, David, or someone? I guess not. Okay, I do have one more video to show. And I have a couple more slides here too. Just quickly, I already talked about this. Basically, what you're doing with nuclear is driving a turbine to produce AC. And here's a video about the future of nuclear energy. So we've talked about quite a bit about why it doesn't seem economical or feasible, but that may not be true. So let me try to bring that up.
Energy prices.
I think this is the one. This will take us just about till noon. So I do want this to go over a couple slides after this. Okay. Nothing real groundbreaking there, but I thought that was interesting.
David, if I stop recording, can you pick it up? You're muted.
Yeah, I can try.
All right.
I have to leave pretty soon myself. Anyway, I have a 12:30 appointment.
Thanks, Tom. Excellent presentation.
Dean, you had a question? Thanks.
Yeah, great stuff. And you know, return on investment, vulture capitalism is both good and bad, as in get rich, make money now. And you know, how much government involvement should we have in this planning? I don't know. But remember, Russia used to have their 5-year plans. China said we have a 50-year plan. And, you know, that's the centralized. So that's a good argument. Anyway, I got to go drive a car. Great stuff, Tom.
Yeah, I do have a couple more slides, but I think I won't get to them today. Maybe I'll do another presentation on energy and incorporate those plus some of the other sources of.
There's a whole lot of stuff in this subject, a whole lot.
Yeah.
All right, bye, y'all.
Thank you.
See you, Dean. What do you have, David?
I first started reading about small nuclear reactors about 20 years ago, and they still are not a proven technology. It's not clear when you start talking about molten salt that you're going to have, that's a very corrosive material.
Yeah.
And it's not clear that you're going to have the lifetime on those pipes. The reason they rated the nuclear power plants at 40 years is because there are some long-term effects of high temperature, high corrosion. It's not, well, it is sort of like rocket science. It is technically complicated and expensive.
And complex.
Yep.
There was a time when we were having what were called nuclear reactors being shot into orbit. But they were not really reactors in this sense. They were radioisotopes that were just steadily decaying and providing electricity for various satellites.
Nuclear batteries.
Yeah.
And there's some very interesting efficiency potential devices, but they tend to be rather expensive.
Thorium.
Well, thorium is basically a breeder reactor also. There is some uranium involved. I just want to show you what my last 3 slides here are. This is a little more general about newer trends coming up with green hydrogen, carbon capture, renewable energy growth in general. And it's a little hard to read, but intermittency of renewables, how to address that. The grid infrastructure, other things we have to think about, policy and financing to help encourage renewables, and public acceptance, such as accepting nuclear power, if that's the way we want to go. Now, this one, I would like to just look at a little more carefully. This, if I can get it bigger here. I don't want to start at the beginning here. Well, complete slide. There. Okay. This just compares a number of these sources of electrical power as far as safety and being clean. Coal is the worst in both of these areas. some of these numbers are a little suspect, like for coal oil and natural gas, these deaths might be actually slightly undercounted because it's hard to include environmental things that can make people sick or cause them to die early. We have greenhouse gas emissions over here, and we see that coal is bad as far as health and safety and cleanliness. Nuclear energy is pretty good at both of these. Hydropower shows 1.3 deaths, but you know why that is? It's because in 1975, it was, what was it, China? Yeah, a dam broke and flooded and killed over 100,000 people.
Mhm.
It's due to that one incident mostly, this number.
It was really bad.
Yeah, it was. But that's why that looks like it's a little dangerous, the hydropower.
And there are a lot more dams in the world.
Yes, and they
Yeah.
do flood and break sometimes,
Yes.
but they don't normally kill 100,000 people.
No, well, the thing is that the big dam deaths are from big dams that release a lot of water.
Yeah.
That runs downstream and takes out the next dam, getting more water and going further downstream.
That could possibly happen with a new dam that China is building in Tibet or wherever.
Oh God, I don't want to think about that one.
Yeah.
That would.
So anyway, solar looks really good. This 53 tons of emissions, I'm not sure exactly why that is.
I'm trying to figure out nuclear energy and gas emissions, greenhouse gas.
Yeah, 6 tons over, like, since
I'm
it's
trying to
been
figure out why.
around.
If you're
I'm trying to figure out.
using fossil fuels to build big, expensive buildings,
Yeah,
Ah,
you're going to
that's
have
okay.
could be the input.
Okay, that's what
yeah,
it is.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing about nuclear and high temperature process to boil water, it's not at all efficient. And that heat can be used other ways.
Right.
All of the temperature difference needs a hot side and a cold side to get any work done. All of that potentially is subject to more efficiency.
Yeah.
New systems that can do the job more efficiently.
There are some hybrid plants that both generate electricity and use the heat for heating.
Yeah, exactly. And so if the heat is a saleable product, and that is what they're doing in Europe when they do district heating, as well as electric generation. If you've got an additional saleable product, you can charge less for each of the portions.
Yeah.
And so that's a risk to thinking you're going to basically ship your heat down the river like the current nuclear power plants are built to do. Potentially you could do a carbon dioxide, what is it? When it's supercritical, no, it's in a region between a gas and a liquid. And GE has been building turbines that they think will take over because they're 5 or 10% more efficient than a steam turbine.
Unfortunately, I have to go. I have to be out of here within 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed listening to all you guys. Thank you.
Good meeting you, Don.
Tom, could you hand it over to someone? And
I'll keep it going.
yeah, I would like a little more info on our hybrid meeting on May 25th.
See ya.
24th, I believe. But look on that Saturday.
Okay.
It is posted that there is such a thing on the meetup for that day.
Ah, okay. And like it has the address of.
Yes.
All right.
88th in Portland.
Okay. And is this a library?
Yep.
Yes.
Hennepin County Oxborough Library.
And we won't expect you to come, Eric.
And is this going to be a one-shot test thing or?
Basically.
Yeah. We're going to do this and see if it works. And if it does, then maybe we'll do it again.
Well, we'll probably schedule a couple more just because you have to schedule them a month or two in advance to get it.
Oh, well, then we should do that, I suppose.
Well,
And unfortunately, none of the libraries will allow you to schedule a meeting weekly.
correct. And it's a first come, first serve on these. There are 5 in the Hennepin County system that have this kind of Zoom capability, that have the equipment to support the Zoom meeting.
Okay. And remember that Ramsey County is out there.
Yeah. If we wanted to try and attempt a movable feast once a month, we might be able to do that. But I suspect we would be better off looking at every quarter, maybe.
Well, that was, I wanted as much info as I could get on that. Have you looked into the notion that we have the equipment to make this happen?
We used to have the equipment, and Tom has gone out and gotten some cables to help us.
Like a screen to project things on, or?
We used to have a projector, and we think it was with Brian Torrin when he passed away, but we don't know where it's gone.
Ah,
And we went and visited the Oxborough Library on Thursday, and Bob
Yes.
Kaufman is going to be doing the presentation from his computer, and it's
We
Tom
got
and I.
got it set up and it worked. And I have extension cables so we can move it
A little
to a
farther
different
away.
place and 15 feet away from where we were, which should put us close to the middle of the room. And I got an extension cable for my room microphone so we can properly cite that somehow.
We hope.
Yeah. Oh, they work.
Okay.
They work great. It's one of these. Why didn't I think of that inventions? Your sound waves are running all around the room, and they're bouncing off the wall. And so instead of trying to put the microphone by the performer, you put the microphone a 1/16 of an inch away from the wall, and you capture the pressure wave between the wall and the microphone.
Huh?
They work absolutely great. Unless somebody comes dancing by and you're using the floor as the reflector.
So we're going to hear all the, by putting it on the table, we're going to hear all of the pens scratching on the paper.
Yeah.
If anybody's taking notes.
No, you could. It's not that sensitive.
Okay.
That's what, when we were down at Kiwanis, not Kiwanis,
Yeah. Knights of Columbus.
Columbus, we always had that big U. And I was going to put a table in the middle and put that microphone on the table in the middle. It'll be equal distance from everyone.
Okay.
And isolated.
Yep.
And we'll see.
That makes sense. If we started with 3 tables, one in the middle, one on each side, people sitting on the tables on each side, and the microphone on the middle on a separate table, that would get around any of the noise from people at each table.
Yeah, and it also lets the presenter be at the middle table at the far end, facing the people who are on the other 2 tables.
Yeah, okay. We'll see.
But yeah.
There will be a learning curve on that, like everything else.
Oh God, yes, there's going to be a curve on this. I just hope it's a steep one, not something that drags on for weeks and months.
I looked at Meetup this morning, or Zoom this morning, and it said this meeting was from 12 to 1. I can't imagine why that changed, because I never set up a meeting from 12 to 1. But we've been using Zoom for, what, a couple of years now.
Yeah, Zoom is always changing everything.
Somebody thinks they're going to improve something, and occasionally we make mistakes.
Yep.
So, anyway, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Oh, Carol, your hand up again?
No, I was looking, and of course, Tom had to go away because I wanted to tell him we'd really like to see more of your presentation. I mean,
we will.
He always creates something that's,
Yeah, it was already
enough material for 4.
It was already in 2 parts, and I suspect it might become 3.
Yeah.
Well, I still haven't finished my presentation on Brighter. I've only done 2 presentations out of it, but I think he has 12 videos now, and we've seen 4 of them.
Well.
And I'm looking for a topic for my next presentation, so if something is burning in someone's mind, please toss it in. I have thorium, and I have, I've had a half a dozen different ideas come to mind.
Well,
but I want to go back and revisit the idea of making methane a solution instead of a problem to climate change.
Ooh.
Which is what I started with the fresh look of methane a couple weeks ago.
We could play an episode of Good Neighbors.
But as far as topics, last week we talked about wasting energy. We talked about the future of dentistry.
Yeah.
Today we talked about terrorist costs to our economy as a possible topic.
Well, and if you remember during our discussion on, I think that was, by then it was down to just you and me discussing the future of dentistry, that
I asked my dentist and he said he'd think about it.
What?
Yeah.
I asked the dental professor at the University of Minnesota, whether he might consider doing a talk for us on the future of dentistry. And he said he would he'd do a little research and think about it.
Well, but if you recall, we have this requirement supposedly for the futurists that we don't talk about politics. But right now it is impossible to talk about the future of dentistry without talking about politics. And that is true for an enormous number of
Topics.
Absolutely.
Yes. Government is stuck. Government has stuck its nose in everywhere, and maybe we should do the future of limiting government.
Yep.
Now that's a futile effort.
It is.
I'm sure there's a Boyle's law there, government expands to fill the space available.
Yeah, the early story about this is the Tower of Babel.
Okay.
Yep.
By the way, David, I really want to say I think you are doing a fabulous job. And I keep seeing how much you are doing in the background to keep us going. And yeah.
Yes.
And it's not clear that it's sustainable. But we need at least 1 or 2 more people who are willing to do presentations every other month.
Yeah.
Or someone who's willing to bring in outside speakers. And then there's the question of, will outside speakers tolerate this kind of a group?
Mm-mm.
How would we find outside speakers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can always
to join us, because we don't have quite enough people willing to do presentations.
Yeah, but it's almost as hard to dig up an outside speaker as it is to do the presentation.
Presentation is easier.
They're different skills.
Okay. Wait a minute.
Knows a lot of people. And he's willing to talk to them about, would they do a presentation for a small group?
Well, we could certainly change our question and answer thing to make it more amenable for an outside speaker.
Presenter friendly.
Yes. Particularly since I take it Jason has gone away permanently?
I can't answer that. I certainly hope not, but it's kind of looking that way.
Well, he was really hard on presenters.
And we were a little hard on him. So
he was really hard on himself too.
Yep.
Oh, are either of you fans of British television?
Yes, some British television.
Okay, I don't know where she found it, but my wife has been delighting me for the last month with an old British TV series called Pie in the Sky.
P-I-E?
P-I-E, in the Sky. This middle-level British cop, his dream has always been to be the chef in a restaurant. And so they open a restaurant while he continues to be a cop. And I'm sure
both of those are more than, each of those is more than a full-time occupation.
Yes. And it's hilarious. Every
Is it played as comedy?
Yeah, it is absolutely hilarious. His boss is an idiot. The problems
Is
he
this
had.
showing on BBC America or?
I think it was on Prime, but I'm not sure.
Ah,
If you just, anyways, 40-hour-long episodes. And it actually has a conclusion. It doesn't just peter off. It actually comes to a conclusion. But if car chases and the problem of mushrooms and
well, you know,
every episode he's got a cooking problem to solve, and he's got a cop problem to solve, and he's got his boss to solve.
well,
If there's some way you could incorporate a 1-hour show into a 1-hour discussion of the future, and maybe a little bit of the future of entertainment.
well, you know, there are, it is traditional in any town of reasonable size that there is at least one cop bar. So why not a cop restaurant?
I probably need to go too. See you next week.
Yeah, bye-bye. Oh,
Thanks.
Pie in the Sky. It's hilarious.
Yeah. And David, again, thank you for all the stuff you are doing for us.
Yeah, bye-bye.
See you.